Hi, and welcome to week 8. Don't forget this week, Monday at 1 to 2, I'm going to have a Zoom call just open to anyone who wants to pop in or join to answer any questions. These would be less personal project questions and more general questions in Maya. How do I get this tool to work? I'm not sure about this. If there's no one on the call, then I might be able to look at a specific assignment. If you're unable to attend, email me questions and I will answer them, and I will record the Zoom meeting. I have a little link here. It's just a reminder of common modeling tools and what they're used for. It's just nice to be reiterated and spoken in a different way. Your first assignment due Wednesday is a render of your high poly and low poly model right next to each other. So clean up anything that you would like on your midterm, position your high poly and low poly models next to each other, submit a rendered still. So how do we do that? Well, currently, everything that you've done in Maya, you have to save the Maya file, right? So I couldn't send my mom and dad a copy of whatever I've done because they don't have Maya. So let's just pretend this is my high poly and low poly model, okay? We can render, aka taking frame by frame the images that I have in Maya and putting them in a 2D space so that we can watch them. Today we're just going to go over rendering a still. Later in the term we'll go over rendering a video. But what you're going to want to do is in your viewport, whichever viewport you want to render. Now we'll talk about cameras and you can set up new viewports and all that, but for right now I would just use your perspective view. You're going to click on this resolution gate button. Looks like a blue ball with a white rectangle around it. If we click that on, you can see that everything kind of jumped a little bit. We have this darker area and it says 960 by 540. So by default in Maya, the camera is 960 by 540. And this is what you would actually see in the render view. So we can set this up however you want it to look like. But I specifically said I want 1920 by 1080. So we need to look at our settings. So up over here we have a couple of clapboards that are our render view. So this first one on the left, open render view. Now nothing happens immediately. We have our Arnold renderer, which used to be a separate company that Maya bought and is now using. There's Maya software, Maya hardware, Maya vector. Don't worry about these middle two. For this one, we're just going to do Maya software. So click on Maya software and then hit this clapboard on the left to render your current frame. Now, things seem a little dark, right? We haven't talked about lighting yet, and so Maya is just using the default lighting that it sees in the scene. Let me minimize this a little bit so you can see the whole thing. You can see my the size of my render, what frame it is, how long it took to render, and what camera it's rendering from. So, a couple things we can do. I can create a ground plane, and I'll just scale that up. Make sure that your objects are sitting on it. You know, you don't want to cut off your objects. We could use a side view to make sure it's perfect, but for the sake of this video, then I'll just hit that clapboard again. And there we go. That's going to be good enough. If you want to use a different shape as your bottom, if you want it to be rounded, that's fine. If you want it to go completely off camera, that's fine. Everything is up to you. All right. So now you can see here. So that is just a preview in Maya. If I click the one to the right that says display render settings, and if I just hold my mouse over it, it'll tell me, I can click on that and I can change some things here. So I am using Maya software, so this is fine. You could change this drop down here, but we're going to use Maya software. I'll call this whatever it is you want. Image format, I had asked for a Targa or a TIFF, so we can scroll down, just the regular TIFF. Name.extension, because it's a single frame, so that means it's going to render fuller, high, low poly, .tiff. I'm rendering for my perspective camera, aka my perspective view, but here's where we want to change some things. So I'm going to do 1920 by 1080, and you can see in my viewport it jumps to change the camera size. Resolution, we can leave at 72 for this. You could turn this up to 300 if you were rendering something really important. Rendering, this won't take you very long just because it's a simplified piece. We don't have lights, we don't have textures and all that stuff, but rendering is a huge process. Places like Pixar and all of that have render farms where basically they set up, I mean, I don't even know how many they have, but let's just say they have 50 computer towers in a room without screens, and they let the towers run constantly to render a frame. Because think about it, if I'm rendering just a 5-second animation, that's 24 frames per second, so 24 times 5, then imagine if each frame took a minute, how long it was going to render. But frames can take hours on their own. Again, this won't take very long, but just so you're aware. So now that I have my 1920 1080, you may want to zoom in, zoom out, rotate. Just try to pick an angle that's really showing off both models. We can always do a little preview here. Looks great, but now we need to save it. Oh no! I will pause this and be right back. Alright, so crashes happen to everyone. Save often, increment your saves. So from here, we know we have it set up right. It's 1920 1080, perspective. I've already done the settings. We're just going to go into our modeling dropdown and go to rigging. I lied. We're going to go to rendering, render, and then batch render. Continue, and then I don't know if you can see it. Let me shrink this up here. Down here it's going to say rendering with Maya software. Mine's opening a second little Maya file as we talk, and then it'll just snap and it'll go through 0 through 100% and be done. Here we go. Result, rendering completed. So then you can hit this little semicolon. This is actually a lot of the code that goes into it, but you can see rendering done, and then it'll tell you where it's saved. So users, it's going to be the different first couple of ones, but it's always going to be documents, Maya, project, default images. It gets a little confusing, but we'll just go in here and we'll go into documents, Maya, projects, default, images, and then full or high poly. I'll just drag it to my desktop. And then we can see full or high poly. So then you'll just submit this image into Canvas, showing off your high poly and low poly model. Now you can email this, save it to your phone, whatever you want, but it is a still image. All right. I'm going to make this bigger again just to fill up the space. So now that's due Wednesday. Just the TIFF or Targa file. No need for the Maya file. Now, your big weekly project. Using the front and side views provided, you're going to create 2 base versions of a head. Now, let me start by saying that this is a very difficult task. Human characteristics, especially a face, are very difficult to create. So for this, we're just going to get the base forms. I'm not looking for any details. This should be a low poly model. The great thing with faces and heads is we can look at the muscle structure to see where edge loops should go. Where do we have mass and where do we keep movement in our face, and that's how we know where to put our edge loops. So for one version, you're going to start with a cube. For the second one, you're going to start with a plane. So your file that you submit in Canvas, you're going to submit your Maya file. It should only have two objects in it, a cube and a plane. You're not going to bring in anything else. You're only going to use that. So I am going to, I'll just do a new one. So I've provided you with the front and side view. So let's put these in. Remember, we'll go into View, Image Plane, Import Image. Is this my front or side? Side. So I'll go to Side Head, Front, all right, now I did get this off the internet, free to use, all of that. Now, sometimes when you look at things, these aren't lined up, right? We've got a little bit of a gap here. So we can move this up. You want to make sure your images are aligned, looking good. Then I'll take these and I'll make layer from selected. One word. All right. So now I can't move these, I can't touch them. I am going to start in the front view, okay? It's up to you if you want to do the neck or not. I'll leave that in your hands. So for one, we're going to start with a cube, which is kind of how we've been modeling so far in the term. So we're going to get this base form. Okay? Now again, this is more organic, so it's difficult to deal with. I'm going to suggest that you start with adding a few subdivisions. Again, nothing too crazy. And we are going to have additional time to work on this idea of planar versus box. We're going to have additional time to work on humanoids, and we're going to have additional time to work on characters. So I know this is a lot for 1 week, but we're just getting the base ideas. So then I'll just go in and I will start molding, right? Clicking and dragging to make sure that I'm getting the vertices that are behind. And we'll start shaping this out. So I'm going to need an edge loop for the top and bottom of the ears. But for right now, I'm going to just focus on the head form. Now, what I was talking about earlier was the muscle structure and how we can actually follow that. So right now, I have very straight across edge loops, and that's not giving us any sense of depth. That is just flat. But we can see that we have muscle that kind of goes up and over. So I'm going to actually grab all of these and start to move them up. And I'll grab the center and move them up. So I'm getting a rounded shape. Same with down here. And as we get more detail, you would actually get loops around the eyes, loops around the mouth. Now we can decide, because we don't have very much detail here, so maybe this one is not as dramatic. Okay. Then I'll look in my side view. Got a lot to work on here. I'll go into object mode and scale this out to start. And again, I said it's up to you if you want or how you want to model the neck. Oops. Now, because I've already done my front view, you can see I'm starting to get a little weird overlap because I have different vertices at different points. Not all of these line up. So it's important that we think about all vertices and then that you check it. If you're not sure what's going on, take a look. Still looking good. Got the right idea, and then we can go back. You know, it's important to check as you go along because it's going to be harder once you've gotten to a certain point to go back and fix. Okay, so you'll keep going, shaping out the nose. If you want to extrude out the ears, if you want to extrude out the nose, you can always just kind of form this for the lips and the chin, and then we can take some of the front faces to extrude the nose. Again, let's pull all these up. And notice that I'm pulling layers. And what I mean by layers are rows of vertices. Because if I just brought this one up and overlapped it or went past, it's not going to create a clean model. So I know that I've got some space here. I'm still trying to keep my faces pretty even in size. So I'm bringing up a lot at a time. And be careful with overlap. Okay, and again, check it. And see how it's starting to form. You can also hit hotkey 3 to see the smooth version. Hotkey 1 brings us back to hard edged. So you'll continue with that until you have the base form. This is your cube model. Done and set. Now we're going to do the same thing starting with a plane. Okay, this can get, this is kind of a different way of thinking because we've always started with a full shape. So I'm just going to drag this out of the way and bring up my image planes. Same thing, I'll start in the front. Now it's up to you if you want to start with a face or a plane that takes up the entire face, or if you want to start small and move from there. If we were creating a high poly model, I would recommend that you start small. A lot of times we start with this loop, creating it with planes. You do not need to do this. I'm just going to show you so you get an idea of what I'm saying. So I'll rotate this 90. We do not need all these subdivisions. Turn these off. All right. So a lot of times what we do is create a plane, and then I would mold this to fit my drawing. And then I would go into my edge mode and extrude. And then I would move that edge. And then I could extrude again and move here. And you'd start to actually shape this to match, again, that muscle structure. And we'd go all the way around to build the eye. We'd go all the way around to build the eye. Then you can see we'd bring our edges up and bring these edges kind of on an angle here. You'd have another loop here, and you'd merge things together. And we get the nose. The nose would actually be a hole that we could extrude forward. So it can get very in-depth and detailed. What I'm looking for, which eventually we will get there, but start with a plane. Again, however you see fit. I'm going to rotate this 90. Okay. So, oops. Now that I have this, I'll go into vertex mode and I will shape. Now this is just a plane, so there's nothing behind it. So I'm going to shape this out. I'm just clicking and dragging around these out of habit. There's nothing behind them to click and drag. I would probably recommend we do an edge loop down the center so that we can get a nice midpoint. Okay, so now here comes the hard part. We need to do the side view. And right now it's just this plane down the center. There's nothing there. So you need to build it and extrude it back. Okay, so what I would do is start by moving whichever direction you want. If you want to start in the back, I would suggest probably starting in the front, but moving this forward. Starting to move our vertices to match in here. I'm going to ignore the nose for right now because we can always come back and extrude that. Alright, so now I check my perspective view. And I kind of have a shield, right? But we're getting that front form that I have over here. Now we can go in, edge mode, double click, and I'm going to get that whole outside edge. And I'm going to do an extrude. I'll hit W for my move tool, and I'll pull it back in space. Now I'll go into vertex mode, and I need to shape it out even more because our head is not a perfect shape. And for this, I am clicking and dragging to make sure to get those back pieces. Checking my perspective view. Alright, looking good. Go into edge mode. Grab that whole loop. Extrude. Hit W for my move tool and pull that back and shape it. Now once I have this kind of shell completed, I'll still go in because these are still looking pretty straight across and I'll need to follow the muscle structure. But this allows me to get even more specific with where I'm placing vertices as I go along instead of having them straight. People like both styles. I will say planar modeling is more industry standard. It is a little bit more difficult to learn. It's kind of difficult because with the box model, you know what you're working with, you can see it all right away, but then you have to mold your vertices to fit, right? So we have to kind of adjust and make things work. Whereas planar modeling, you don't see the end result until the end, but we can position things exactly where we want them along the way. I'm just going to do one more extrude to show you how to close this. So I'm going to go into edge mode, select my outer edge, edit mesh, extrude, and let's just say that I've already done my entire head. So we're at the back here. Try to get this done. All right, let's say it's something like that. Like that looks great, but I've got this huge hole. Well, remember we've talked about bridge. We've talked about fill hole. So you need to determine where things are going to be connected. Now I have 16 edges, so I have an even number. If we go to bridge, you can see it will close it, but then I need to connect edges here, right? Because all of our edges need to be part of loops. So let me go over here. Oh, actually, I'll just connect them. Looks like I have oh no, that's okay. So edit mesh, connect. Well, that didn't do it the way that I wanted, so we can do multi-cut. Grab from my top here, look at the bottom point, hit enter. Now maybe we need to get some of the cross ones as well. Okay. Looks like if I go from the front that this one should actually have been across. Like that. So we're getting a full loop. So then remember, if I create an edge that I don't want, I go into edge mode, I'm going to select it, but we need to delete edge and vertex. There we go. And now you can start creating this form because our head, comes out from these vertices. And then you'll start shaping based on the drawing. Okay, so then when I'm all done, you can see your two models side by side. And we've got P cube one and P plane one. And you'll see which way you liked better, which one you thought was easier, which one gave you more freedom and flexibility. Again, I want to see the base form. Try to get a little bit of a nose. If you can, do ears, but it's not necessary. I want to see the main head form. Okay? Let me know if you have any questions, and I hope you have a wonderful week.